Snow on Easter Day, record cold temperatures in spots all across America, or most parts of America at least. Baseball games snowed out, flat out cancelled in places due to cold weather. All this as the global warming fight heats up. Just hours ago, Sheryl Crow and Larry David's wife, Lori, kicking off a multi-city tour to get college students to join their crusade. But Chris Horner says the current weather in America shows global warming activists are out of touch. Chris is the author of the Politically Incorrect Guide to Global Warming. John at Passacantando, he couldn't disagree more. John, the executive director of Greenpeace USA. Chris, may I start with you? Freezing Easter during global warming. Can you make that much out of 1 week's weather?
No, you can't reasonably. The problem is the global warming industry has made a career on telling people that today's weather really matters when it cooperates. That is, if it's warm, it's proof of catastrophic man-made global cooling. When storms don't happen and when it's cool, Stuart, that's just weather. You have to remember, either Al Gore needs to take a few more trips around the planet in those private jets and turn up the heated pool, or maybe the weather gods are having fun with people who rather audaciously tell us they can predict what things are going to be like 100 years from now using computer models that can't project past climate. So quickly, the history of the movement, they created a global cooling industry. When it cooled for 3 decades, they claimed all the world scientists agree. No, they didn't. Then the temperature trend reversed, and so they created a global warming industry, and they said all the world scientists agree. No, they don't. It hasn't warmed since 1998. Every time Al Gore gives a speech, it seems there's a record cold where he shows up, and now they can't avoid these embarrassments. The fact is, weather happens, climate changes, always has, always will.
Hey, John, I got to tell you, I was in upstate New York for the Easter holidays, 3 days, and it snowed every day, temperatures in the 20s. I mean, look, is that totally irrelevant to global warming?
Well, it was a cold week. Even my Washington Nationals had an awfully cold start to their baseball season. But there's a very important difference between the weather, which can be anything from one day to the next, and the global climate system. You've got 18 of the 20th warmest years ever recorded in human history have taken place in the last 20 years. 2006 was the warmest year, global average, ever recorded. January this year, warmest January ever on record. This may, in fact, despite the chilly last week we had, be one of the warmest winters we've ever had. So, yes, the science is in. There's a global consensus on the science. Global warming is here. It's happening now. All the auto companies, Walmart, Goldman Sachs, everybody's ready to move.
Right.
The last freaks, the last
trying
radicals.
To profit off of this are jumping in, John. That we closed a third of the world's surface temperature measuring stations in 1990, and suddenly we had the world's hottest decade. Come on, you
Chris,
can't even talk about temperatures before 1990.
Chris, you were funded by ExxonMobil for 10 years to lie about global warming. They won't even fund you anymore.
Ad hominem doesn't help your case. It's the sign of
global warming is here.
With the facts.
The science is in.
We shut down a third of the world's surface temperature measuring stations, and suddenly we had the hottest decade, but it hasn't warmed since 1998.
You didn't shut down the weather measuring stations.
Well, John, I
really just want to jump in for a second because, John, I'm going to quote the professor of climate science at MIT, who says there is a lot of evidence that the globe has cooled since 1999. What do you make of that?
Well, you're talking about Dr. Lindzen. He's a well-known skeptic. What you have to do is you have to go to the scientific consensus.
He's a professor of climate studies.
That's right, he is.
MIT.
But there are thousands of climate scientists in the world, and let's go with their authoritative conclusion, which came out last week from the United Nations Environment Program. We've got global warming, it's human-induced, and the impacts are here and now. Industry is ready to move.
You can't argue with one thing. The solar activity correlates with climate, correlates with temperature over the past 100 years, 200 years, 300 years. The data gets sketchy after that.
Chris, you're
CO2
making the same argument.
CO2 emissions do not correlate with temperature, John. You want to pin it on man. When it's cold, it just makes sense. When it's hot, it just makes sense. Because to you, you know the human did it. You know man is the agent of doom, but the science doesn't back you up.
Discern this, Chris. You're like the last
computer models can't tell me what happened last year, but it hasn't warmed since '98. You can talk about doom over the horizon with computer models that can't accurately project
years, Chris.
No, John, now wait a minute. We haven't had Mr. Fahrenheit's thermometer for more than a little less period of time than you're talking about.
Chris,
we closed a third of the world's surface measuring stations in 1990, and suddenly it heated up, but it hasn't warmed up since 1998.
Gentlemen, I'm sure that this debate is going to continue for a long, long time, but not right here, regrettably. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.